Welcome to Everytrait, the biopunk philosophy channel. You may call me ZJ for now, and we're still in phase one, pop culture and practice videos. Today we're going to be going over alignment, both how to separate it as a philosophy from the character's personality to write more nuanced characters, but also how to apply it in a way that's maybe more meaningful than just predicting what a fictional character would do. So I do expect this video to be my most downvoted because it's about alignment. If you want a lot of downvotes, make an alignment video, but everyone else got to make theirs. I'm going to make mine. This is because it's a made up concept. So your take on it is correct. So is mine. And that's not true of most things in life. But of alignments, it is. So right away, I'm going to be disagreeing with some of the things that are in even some players' handbooks. So let's start with the basics, chaos versus law. If you believe that traditions are the glue that holds society together, you're lawful. If you believe that traditions are peer pressure from those long dead, you're chaotic. Basically, lawful seeks to avoid taboos, follow traditions, follow the law. The law is a tradition, basically. Also, more likely to follow power structure, that sort of thing. Chaos is more likely to make decisions individually based on the specific nuanced circumstances. So they tend to be less set in their ways and less likely to just keep repeating the same things over and over again. Now, in our society, we often call anything that is chaotic evil, but that's not true, obviously, in a two-tier system. Chaos is anything that breaks taboo or ignores tradition, so long as doing so does not harm another, unless in that case it's chaotic evil. But chaos is separate from evil. Now, in a lot of games that keep track of law versus chaos, chaos is theft is chaos. So theft is chaos, not evil. However, I don't think that's entirely true. This is my first disagreement. Because if you're stealing like an heirloom from someone that has no value to you and it's just to hurt them, that's evil. If you are stealing from someone who needs what they have to survive, that's evil. If you are stealing some ultra wealthy person's third set of backup silverware that they won't notice missing in their lifetime, that's just chaotic. So, still against the law, but that's why it's called chaotic. And in our society, we're used to calling anything that's chaotic evil. We don't use the word chaotic in our day to day speech when talking about behaviors. Now, another point I disagree with is the idea that humanity's default alignment is true neutral. Even with the edges stretched out, I think the default alignment for a human is lawful neutral. And this is because of the strong hierarchy instinct and the tribal structure. This lends people to be more submissive, basically. And you see this even with people who consider themselves rebels. They will follow a leader, they will dress like that leader, talk like that leader, make sure they fit in the group. They are being submissive to a different leader than the rest of society, but they're still ultimately being a form of lawful. They're still not making decisions for themselves, right? So it is very rare for someone to truly be independently minded. Now, good versus evil. So evil is you're going out of your way to harm others because it brings you joy, or you just do not care if you harm others. You don't care if your actions cause suffering. That's cold evil. Hot evil is if you actively seek to cause harm because you enjoy it. Both are evil. Results matter more than motivations, after all. And if the results are evil, then you're evil. Now, even if you just don't care. If you wish ill will on your worst enemy, that doesn't make you evil. That just makes you relatable. So you can be good aligned and wish ill will on your worst enemy. That's okay. And the opposite's also true. So good is if you go out of your way to help people, even if you can't be rewarded for doing so. And if your actions cause a benefit to mankind or to the world. Um, However, if you would only be willing to sacrifice for the person that's closest to you, that doesn't make you good. So you can be evil aligned and still be willing to sacrifice for the person closest to you. That just makes you relatable. And you'll notice on my chart, they're spread out. And that's because I think you have to be like past the 75% threshold in one direction to count. But yeah, good and evil, pretty simple concept. And our first custom alignment is chaotic stupid, which you probably guessed what the CS meant. So chaotic stupid, chaos doesn't mean doing the opposite of anything that's traditional, opposite of anything that's breaking every taboo deliberately. That's what you do if you're acting out and trying to get attention. True chaos is making individual calls regardless of what's traditional. So if you're doing the opposite of everything that's traditional, you're just as easy to predict as someone doing what's traditional. So you're chaotic stupid. You're just doing the opposite because it's the opposite. But that means you're as much controlled by tradition as the traditionalist is. So, to give you an example, let's try chaotic good versus lawful good when it comes to something like um, a society where autopsies are taboo. So there's a serial killer, and the chaotic good is going to perform the autopsy, whereas the lawful good will not. And this is them breaking taboo, but as a result, they catch the killer 10 victims earlier, and yes, the family that didn't want the autopsy is traumatized, but the other 10 families that didn't have to lose a family member are not. So that would be a difference between chaotic good and lawful good. Now, someone's summoning undead to work as labor in the city for construction. Okay, lawful good would not want that to happen because that's against tradition. You don't do that. Undead or evil. Chaotic good would not want that to happen either because it's taking away people's jobs, living people's jobs. They could carry disease, and also, if the person who summoned them is incapacitated, can't give them orders, they might revert to their nature and just start attacking people. So the chaotic good person also would not want undead used in town. Now, they get there in a very different way. It takes them longer to come to that conclusion, but they agree with lawful good. Even chaotic neutral probably would not want that to be done in town because of the threat it would pose to themselves. So they would agree with lawful neutral on that issue. Now, if it was undead being used to excavate ruins on a dead continent, lawful good would be against it. Chaotic good would probably be okay with it, at least neutral to it. So, just automatically doing the opposite of everything that's traditional is not true chaos. True chaos is making individual judgment calls regardless of what's traditional. Now, I'm also going to break from the norm in saying that you're not lawful just for having a code, because that's a rule in a lot of books and it just does not make sense. If you're a cleric and you're serving a chaotic evil god, you would be lawful because you have a code. Your code is to be chaotic evil, so you're lawful. That doesn't make sense. What if your code is to always make judgment calls based on the specific situation? So your code is to be chaotic. So that makes you lawful? What if your code is to never wear socks with sandals, and so you're burning down a village, an innocent village, but you're lawful because you're wearing boots? See the problem? So I don't like anything with a code is lawful. I don't like that. I don't use that. So now we'll get to the weird corners of the chart. So you'll notice the chaotic evil corner is thatched. That's because it is not a tenable position. You can be chaotic evil, but being 100%, and the closer you get to 100%, the harder it is to maintain that position. If you're attacking everyone who's on your side, you're not going to have anyone watching your back, and everyone's going to be ganging up against you. So it's not a tenable position. This is a downward spiral. This is the someone with nothing to lose situation. So it's a position that does exist, but only for like a day. So that's why it's thatched. It's not a stable position on the chart. Chaotic good is difficult to maintain because you 100% chaotic, 100% good. You have to make the correct decision every single time. It's actually harder to maintain chaotic good than lawful good. However, you'll notice the lawful good corner is cut off completely. It's missing the tip of it. And that's because it's self-defeating. You cannot be 100% lawful and 100% good. It's impossible. There are laws written to harm people. If you're 100% lawful, that means not only are you following those laws, but you're helping enforce them. There are traditions that overstay their welcomes and end up causing real harm. And you're helping enforce those on other people. You're doing harm. Taboos. I mentioned the autopsy situation. You did harm by not being willing to do that. So being 100% lawful causes evil in the world. And being 100% good means you would have to be willing to ignore certain laws and traditions. You could be lawful good because, like I said, anything past the 75% threshold is qualifies. So you could be 90% lawful, 90% good, but you can't be 100%, 100%. It's physically impossible. It's logistically impossible. You would need to live in a society where no law is ever written to harm, No tradition ever outstays its welcome, and no taboo is ever irrational. So, no such society exists. And what I just described is a neutral good society. So, in order to be truly lawful good, you would have to exist in a neutral good society. And to give you another example of this, we're going to look at the idea of two civilizations warring. And they're using magic, and one of them creates a magic disease, and the other one creates a cure. And there's this like valley community between two mountains, sort of just outside the battle zone, that gets hit with the same disease. And the only cure is arcane, but they have a tradition against using arcane. So the people who come in with a cure, they're arcanists, they come up with all sorts of solutions. Like, okay, you can leave the village. We'll give you the cure there, and then you can go back, or whatever. Or only those who volunteer for the cure can get it, and we'll do it that way. But no, they won't allow it because they want to follow their tradition and stay true to their ways because they're a lawful good town. So they try druidic, they try priestly, they try herbs and things, prayers. None of it works, and everyone in the entire town perishes. Did they defend their traditions? No. Who's left to sing their songs? Who's left to tell their stories? Their traditions are gone. They buried their traditions. They dug a pit out back and shoved their traditions in it and then buried it. So that's an example of being trying to be 100% lawful good. It does not work. A real world example of this is when it comes to GMOs. In many cases, they could be used to cure malnourishment, but they're very taboo in some places. People don't want to deal with them, and so they reject them. And these places might have real malnourishment problems, and so they bury their kids because they wanted to be lawful good. They wanted to at least be lawful neutral. They did not want to break tradition, so they did not accept it, even though it would have benefited them and everything. Okay? Chaos is change. Chaotic evil is destructive change. Chaotic good is constructive change. And this brings me to another point, which is that some people say chaotic good doesn't exist because chaotic evil people think they're chaotic good. Well, a lot of people who think they're lawful good are really lawful evil. And a lot of people who think they're true neutral are really lawful neutral. And some people who think they're chaotic evil are just acting edgy. But if you look at what they actually do, they're true neutral. So every alignment has false claimers. So that does not invalidate an alignment. If you believe there's no such thing as a certain alignment, you probably have not seen it played well at your table, and that's probably why. But I reject that. So now I want to talk about separating alignment from personality. So this whole time I've been talking about alignment as a philosophy, not a personality. When you limit personalities to matching alignments, you end up with very limited character options. This is bad. So for example, you could be great at parties and be lawful. You could be quiet and bookish and be chaotic. And some of the most revolutionary people in history have been quiet and bookish. So I'm going to give you 3 examples, and we'll see where they fit on the chart. So we've got a geneticist working in a lab in an isolated location. They've identified that something might happen that might wipe out humanity. So they are working on a potential treatment, a gene mod treatment. And this is very taboo, of course. Working on human genetics is always taboo. They're ruining their reputation by doing so. But they only accept true volunteers, people who know what they're getting into, know the risks, even tests them on it. Doesn't pay them, doesn't coerce them. They have to seek it out. He does not get many volunteers. As a result, his progress is very slow. But he's willing to sacrifice his own reputation to create this potential cure, and then if it's not needed, he'll just leave it on a shelf for if it ever is needed. But he's not going to force it on anyone, but it's just there in case it's needed type thing. Next, we have a district attorney who is always just trying to get the highest conviction rates. If they know for sure someone did not commit a crime, they still send them to get convicted. Even if they know who really did commit the crime, but it would be too hard to convict them, they go after an easy scapegoat instead. They look like a hero in an embattled district, but really they're the reason the district is riddled with crime because the real criminals never get caught, and they know that, so they run rampant. This district attorney has ruined way more lives than would have been ruined if there wasn't even a district attorney. Our next example is Party Boy Soldier. On shore leave, drinking alcohol down a funnel, topless women, his phone's buzzing in the background, he can't hear it, it's got a picture of a dead body on it. All right, so let's give these characters alignments. Party Boy Soldier, lawful neutral. He feels chaotic in that moment, but he's doing exactly what 1,000 before him have done and 1,000 after him will do in the same way, in the same place. The picture on his phone is not to code. Every now and then someone's made example of for that, but it is quietly encouraged, I think, because it gets them used to seeing death, and so they don't freak out as much. So, okay, maybe 90% lawful, but still lawful neutral, still past the threshold. Most soldiers are lawful. I mean, they are in a hierarchy. They kind of have to be. Lawful evil, you know the target's not a real target. You pull the trigger anyway because you can get away with it. Lawful good, you make extra sure that the target's always the real target. Lawful neutral, you just follow orders. So, the district attorney, neutral evil. They are using the law, but they don't respect it. They don't respect the tradition or the position, and so they're abusing their position. They're abusing the traditions, but they're using the law to do it. So it's kind of nuanced. So neutral evil, entirely self-serving. The geneticist, chaotic good. A lot of people would call messing with human genetics evil, but remember, in society, we call anything chaotic evil, even if it's just chaotic and not actually evil. He is doing chaos in a constructive way, not in a destructive way. And he's taking it at great personal sacrifice. So you can see how some of these people's personalities wouldn't necessarily fit their alignment. Their alignment might be deceptive. This brings us to the second custom alignment, which is devious good. That's what the DG stands for. Devious good is particularly difficult to play. It may appear lawful, neutral, or chaotic good depending on the situation. And it actually will often appear evil. It'll appear neutral evil more often than not, even though it's really good. So an example of this, Pirate Admiral, who is just despicable and just wants to cause as much pain and suffering as possible, has a navigator who's secretly devious good. So the navigator seeks to manipulate the admiral into doing good. So the admiral wants to attack these refugee ships, and the navigator says, wait, I know of a slave ship that's going to have a lot more wealth on it, and we can attack that instead and get a lot richer. And then we can just leave them on the ship chained up, and they'll just drift until they perish. And the admiral is thrilled at this. It's so evil. So he does it. He attacks. He wipes out the crew, takes the gold. Does not know that the navigator dropped keys and diagrams with very simple depictions of how to sail in case they can't read before they leave the ship. So the admiral just freed a bunch of slaves and thinks he's the evilest guy ever. So this is devious good. It's a very difficult tightrope to walk. This is not people who take a position where they know they have to do bad things because they say, oh, if I wasn't here, someone even worse would be here. That's an excuse. That's not devious good. That's just an excuse. Okay? If no one made that excuse, we would live in a much better world. So that's not devious good. Do not mistake it. Devious good actively seeks to twist evil against itself so that it does good. It's very difficult to do. But it would be a very fun idea for like an all-evil campaign to be secretly playing a devious good character and try to trick the other players into doing good. But anyway, next is lazy coward evil. So lazy coward evil, that's what the LCE means, is very much the opposite of devious good, in that it often appears good. It even appears lawful good more often than not. Yet it does far more evil than the other evil alignments. So lazy coward evil is someone who does not want any responsibilities. They do not want any accountability. So to use a fantasy example, we could talk about goblins. In a setting where goblins can be good, like Pathfinder or D&D, some settings they cannot. They're obligatorily evil, but we're going to assume it's a setting where that only comes from their culture and they can be raised better. So Goblin clan is wiped out. There's a couple of kids, though. You could take them, give them to a foster family, raise them up to speak both goblin and human, and then they could end up becoming ambassadors and all this, and they could end up creating a better future for both. But what if it turned out wrong? Lazy Coward Evil wouldn't want to risk it turning out wrong because they would be responsible. They don't want to be responsible. So they come up with an excuse to get rid of the kids so that they don't have to be responsible. And they could phrase this in a way that makes it sound like they care about the greater good. But really, they're just covering themselves. They just don't want to be responsible. A party member turns out to be wanted by Thayans or something, secretly a defector. So the Lazy Coward Evil person says, oh, we can't have a Thayan in the party. They're probably evil. We need to turn them over. Now, turning them over is actually the evil act, but it's being phrased as, oh, they must secretly be evil, right? So we have to work against them. So they're stabbing their own ally in the back. That's another Lazy Coward Evil. So another Lazy Coward Evil example is, there's a angelic being that somehow got trapped in the world, and there are some evil forces after it, and because they're battling for it, a lot of people in town might end up getting hurt. And so the Lazy Coward Evil character would actually justify handing over the being, saying like, this is something from another universe. We shouldn't be dealing with this. It's not our responsibility. They brought danger to us. They are the enemy. They could make a very compelling argument. But what they're really saying is, I don't want to be responsible if someone gets hurt in town. And so they end up turning over the angelic being, and that tips the scales in the balance of evil, which cascades back all over the world, and et cetera, et cetera. So Lazy Coward Evil is very good at making excuses. Now, to use real-world example, Lazy Coward Evil are the type of people in positions of power and authority who will not allow technology to move forward, especially biotechnology and things like that, because they do not want to be held responsible if something bad happens from it. So much fiction is centered around bad things happening from biotechnology, usually zombies, but other things too. So a lot of people have been trained to be against it. They will actively work against it, even if it would save lives. Even if it's guaranteed to improve lives, they will not allow it to go forward. So imagine the trolley problem, right? The 4 on one track, 1 on the other. Except in this case, it's more like 40 million on one track and 1 on the other. Because, yes, experimentation has casualties sometimes, but the millions of people who would be saved by that over the future. So in this case, it's not a trolley. It's more like some sort of grinding combine thing, but whatever. They will not pull the lever. Even if the person on the other track is volunteering and says, pull the lever, they're still not going to. But it gets even worse. Because if there's no one on the other track, they still won't pull the lever. That's not much of a trolley problem, is it? Bunch of people on one track, no one on the other track, and they still won't go on the empty track. On the slim off chance that something would go wrong. This is Lazy Coward Evil. And this causes way more harm in the world than any of the other evils. So if we break it down, chaotic evil, the far tip of it, that would be like just someone going on a crazy spree. They would probably eliminate a couple dozen people. Neutral evil, how many hundreds of lives or thousands of lives did that DA ruin, right? Lawful evil. Lawful evil could be someone who is leading a country, and as a result, they have access to their military, and they start a war of choice that causes hundreds of thousands. That's bad. Actually, the more lawful the evil, it seems like the worse it gets. But Lazy Coward Evil has them all beat. Tens of trillions. But there aren't trillions of people, so how could they be responsible for tens of trillions? Imagine if that very technology they're suppressing is required. Because biotechnology is a big part of space exploration. It's going to be needed. What if that technology they're suppressing, biorestructuring or genetic technology or whatever, would have allowed us to spread to alien worlds? All of those human lives on all of those worlds now don't exist and never will. And humanity will blip out on Earth, never having made its mark on the galaxy. Tens of trillions. that were never even born, but could have been. That's the damage done by lazy coward evil. All because they don't want to be responsible for any results. They're so afraid of something going wrong, they will never allow anything to go right. Where does this come from? Well, it comes from the status quo instinct. It's a very old instinct. It's a lizard brain instinct. If you have food and shelter and water, you don't seek what's over the next horizon. And so people in powerful positions, comfortable positions, often are, their minds are overridden by this instinct. And if we were to replace them, the next people in that position would be the same. And this is a extreme representation of lawfulness as well, because it is blind adherence to status quo. Breaking the status quo does not mean you're good. Following the status quo does not necessarily mean you're evil. But in this case, it causes a lot of evil. And it even harms the person who's ruled by the status quo instinct. For example, think of all the billionaires who desperately want to live longer and are spending millions and millions of dollars to try to live longer, while actively supporting politicians and policies that make it impossible for them to ever live longer. You've probably heard of the blood transfusion thing. Yeah. What they don't tell you is that the mice in those experiments, the rodents in those experiments, did not live any longer than a normal rodent. They looked younger and healthier, but they did not live longer. The only way to extend life is with biorestructuring technology and genetic technology, the two types most likely to be suppressed by the very people who want to live longer. Instincts are not rational, and people will accept fallacious arguments that fit their instincts and reject logical ones that do not. And this is a big part of how lazy coward evil works. So when I think of like the real enemies of human progress, I think of lazy coward evil. They just don't want to be responsible for anything. They don't want to be accountable for anything, but they still want to be in a position of authority. So if you take nothing else from this video, don't take out a position of authority if you're that kind of person. You can be that kind of person, not in a position of authority, and you're not hurting anyone. But yeah, well, that and separate alignment from personality, because it makes more interesting characters. Okay, so this video was a bit of a bait and switch, but I did say at the beginning it was a biopunk channel, so that should have been a clue. All right, so that's been my 2 cents on the alignment system according to the Everytrait channel. I hope you got something out of it, even if you disagreed with parts of it. And yeah, thank you for listening. I've been ZJ, and remember, always gene mod responsibly. Clicky, 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 clicky.